All right, hello, welcome to Court of the Rings on twitch.tv/LotraStream. We're here with a special guest today because I have with me our executive producer, Severlin. How you doing, Sev? Let me get you unmuted quick. There you go. How you doing, Sev?
I'm doing great.
Great. Good to have you on. Really appreciate you being here. Today we're really just kind of doing some Q&A with the community. You see up above here, Corsairs of Umbar, and we're really hard at work getting ready to release Corsairs of Umbar. It got its first content preview on the Bull Roar server this week. Hope you got the chance to
Yeah,
check it out.
exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. And what else should we say here as a way of introduction? What is this time of year find you up to?
Well, obviously, we're up to our ears in working on the expansion. We've shown basically three zones and said, hey, you may not want to look at the city yet because it's not done. And then everyone immediately ran to the city and looked it
Well,
over.
it's because
So
it's city.
that's
It's
exciting too.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. They also the it's pretty cool because the city has a lot of distinct colors and such. And I think it's really super interesting in that it evokes a mood that isn't you just don't see in other places. So they put a lot of work into having the whole landscape has a different feel to it. And I think that the art team knocked out of the park. So I'm sure that people want to kind of run and check that out. But yeah, so the first three zones obviously are fleshed out, and we're still doing polish. And even now we're shoring up all of the city stuff. And obviously there's certain things we're holding back, so the players can't go through it and exhaust it before we go live. But so that's all super exciting.
all right. So while we're doing this a bit today, we're going to be able to put some images up on the screen as well. We got a bit of a Corsairs of Umbar slideshow, just for a little bit of background variety here, while we answer some questions about Corsairs of Umbar or anything else really. It's going to be kind of up to really the will of the chat to sort of determine the how this conversation goes. We do have questions on the forums, several pages of them that we should be able to get to as well. A lot of questions from the forums tended to be, could we ever get insert suggested feature here, something like that. But we could tackle a whole bunch of those as well. So what would you like to start off with, Sev? Do you see anything in particular or anything in particular that you want to start off with?
Sure. So someone asked, when are mariners called corsairs? I like the term corsair as a general term, but in the basically in the world of Middle Earth, the corsairs have a specific meaning, and we just couldn't have PCs running around there because it carries with it a certain story weight, and that's why we went with mariner. So that won't be
Yeah,
changing soon.
yeah. All
Yeah.
right, I'm looking at it. I'm just trying to kind of listen. I'm going to turn you up just a little bit and maybe me down
Sure.
just a little bit.
Do you want to go? Let's go for some forum stuff because I don't want people to feel as though they have to rephrase the forum stuff here. You know what I mean? So let's go
Sure.
through some forum questions that you
All right.
have.
Well, the first question comes from Thuranor, asking a little bit about, will we see adjustments to the deed panel? Thuranor states it's not scalable. Some of the deed tabs are on the side because the panel's a bit small. Can we see improvements here or a new deed panel in the near future?
Yeah, a lot of the panels need work. For instance, we had someone recently looking into what would it take to make the map panel have an option so that you could open it and it would not take up your whole screen. So it would take up, a large portion of your screen, but you could still peek around it and run while it was open. And that's basically the same problem as the deeds panel. So our UI is pretty old, and some of it is scalable, but it has to be built scalable. So a lot of our old panels are not scalable, and that's why they can't be resized. This is why when I say doing that 4K UI update is a giant pain. All of these kind of static panels that were never built to be resized is exactly why, and the deeds panel falls right into this. So as we start looking from panel to panel, going towards our 4K update, the deeds panel is definitely one of them. So if you find panels like that you do want to see being resized, it's good to bring it up here and on the forums. So as we're going through, if we have to make some hard decisions about what panels we're going to scale and what panels that we can't because of time, it's good to have that. It's good to talk about that now. So that's a fine question, and yeah, we're sort of aware on that.
Schmooze wants to know over in Twitch chat. Schmooze feels the Bjorning refresh was not as robust as they would like. Can we expect final polish, another round on the Bjorning refresh anytime soon?
So I don't think the team would agree with me. Balance is never done, right? So yeah, the Bjorning is going to get another pass, as are all the other classes, and the feedback on the forum is looked at, and I don't think that they'll do it now, because I can guarantee you that the whole systems team is working to get everything in order for um, Umbar, and so it's kind of like, pick your time. Right now is a terrible time to go and be bugging them about specifics for classes, because they don't have the time to sort of think about that. They're all trying to get out. Once the stuff is done and they've had a chance to rest after uh, the large endeavor that is an X-Pack, then that would be a good time to start looking at seeing balance again, especially where, at the beginning of next year, the raid will be coming, and you'll definitely want to get them that information for that.
I feel like this next question is missing a little bit of sort of context and backstory, but I'm going to ask it from the forum thread anyway. Uruk wants to know, will we ever nerf reputations and or dailies for the game below level 150? At least level 95 to 115. I have to admit, I don't quite understand the context of the question. You got anything from it?
Probably. I mean, I don't want to start swinging the Nerf bat, but here's the thing. If the players are saying to us, hey, it is more advantageous for me to be doing things in the 95 to 130 range, and I'm bored because it's way below my level, and that's more rewarding than the higher level stuff, then yeah, we definitely want to adjust that. We would want to add stuff to the higher level stuff at the same time as maybe level capping or re-examining the rewards of those, so they're satisfying to leveling people, but maybe not to endgame people. But that's not really a nerf. That's like taking the rewards from one place and moving them to the other, ideally. And I know that it's easy to see, like, sometimes when you move that to other things, it's easy to maybe make mistakes there, where we move them to was a little bit harder to go through than the old place. But that's not really our intention. Our intention is so that the design goal. Man, I apologize today that I am stumbling over my words. I probably need more coffee. The design goal is that those older things should not be more rewarding, that something that is more challenging and therefore more fun. We want you to have fun while earning your rewards. I know that some people, um, so I know that some people don't like the changing of old content, but if it's driving people into content that's boring for them because it's underleveled, then yes, we would want to change.
Broken Shield from Twitch chat. Are we ever going to get a new launcher for the game?
Yes. So here's the update for a 64-bit server and new launcher. So the 64-bit server stuff is being tested, but it's a big endeavor to test it. We probably would like to see the 64-bit server on some kind of test server soon. Maybe even before the end of the year, but we certainly don't want to do it while we're trying to get out an expansion. Maybe beginning of next year, unless when we put it up, we run into some kind of weird crashing issue or some weird perf issue, in which case we have to go back and examine the whole thing. And that could be from, oh, duh, to, oh my God, we don't know what's going on. There's a weird interaction between 64-bit and the virtualization, in which case it could take a long time. For launcher, the launcher is currently in progress, and we are moving on that, but the launcher has to be put out at the same time as multi-factor authentication. Those will go together. I would expect the launcher mid next year, honestly.
Okay. All right. The next question is a bit asking you to pick your favorite child, but Grot Maggot wants to know, as the executive producer of Lotro, what do you consider the, quote, heart of the community to be? What, in your mind, represents the player base the best, and how does this affect gathering feedback for changes and additions to the game?
I mean, I think that the community is this wonderful sort of archipelago of islands of different people that
Right.
enjoy the game in different way, which
Yeah.
makes sort of the experience both super fun, super rewarding, and also somewhat super perplexing. There are people that really, there are people that I've talked to players at meetups that they really want to play one of each class, and they're not at the end game because they try to keep them equal. I've talked to people who are super into housing and baking and living life uh, in Middle Earth and will never do a raid, not because they don't like them, but they're not interested in that. I've met people that love to log into Lotro because of the community and experiencing something like Weathertop is great. But also, we have a lot of players that really love the adventurous side of Tolkien, and they love to do the raids, and they love these instances, and they're looking forward to a new zone where they can be heroic and see the stories. There are also players that are really into exploration. Nothing gets them more excited than exploring every nook and cranny. So when we talk about the city of Umbar, something that looks different and has a lot of exploration points is something that they're really looking towards. And they want to reach the highest level of the game, not necessarily because they're looking at the stats, but because they really want to be able to experience all the game has to offer. And they know that in order to do that, they have to build out, the gear in order to survive that. And they're not doing it for the gear like someone who loves raiding and who loves upgrading their gear. It's more of a means to an end. And all of these people coexist in this wonderful kind of community that is not always as cohesive as we'd like. So designing around that means that there are times where we want to kind of split up our team and hit different things. I think the biggest thing that I would do if I could snap my fingers and change is have more mechanisms for players to group from disparate levels. That's the hardest thing to do because in order to do that smoothly, the game kind of has to be built ground up for it. And there are many things I love about Lotro, but it is not built ground up from the beginning in order to smoothly move from level to level. So I would
Yeah.
love if people could group together more. So level 70 would actually be able to group with someone at 105 or even 140 and do meaningful content and get good rewards. That's probably the biggest weakness of the game right now and something that we've looked at, but there are no easy solutions. All of them are both systems and engineering intense.
Lore Bandit has been asking Twitch chat specifically about a cosmetic equipped parrot that comes with Corsairs of Umbar and has a question about why it takes a actual equipment slot rather than say a cosmetic slot. I think I know the answer to that, but I'm not sure if you know anything more about that.
Sorry, what piece
There's
specifically are you talking
the
about?
parrot. So there's a parrot pet that you get with Corsairs of Umbar, but there's also an
Right.
equipable parrot that sits on your shoulder, and it takes an equipment slot rather than say a cosmetic slot, and it has to do with the animations and particle effects that are the cool pieces of the parrot that sits on your shoulder requires it to be an actual equipment slot, which means that you have to unequip, say, something, a piece of statted gear or something in order to equip the parrot on your shoulder.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
basically we don't have another slot in our uh, inventory right now to put that. So that kind of parrot, I would love for that parrot to be able to, in order to implement, yeah, I mean, you have it exactly right. There are certain things that a character can do and can implement and can work in our scripting system for an equipped piece of item that it can't with a pet. The pet doesn't promote certain particle effects, and without a lot of work, in order to get a parrot that sits on your shoulder, you need to have it attached to equipment slot, which is why we gave you both. If you're running around and you really need to do hard content, then the parrot flies around with you. And if you're sitting around a town and you put on the parrot, then yeah, it replaces a piece of gear, and that's not ideal. But like, it needs to be anchored, as Orion says, to a piece of gear in order for the particle effects and animation to know what the player are doing. So hopefully, by getting both, the game fantasy is that in times of peace, the parrot can sit on your shoulder and do cool stuff. But when stuff is fighting you, the parrot is probably going to want to be flying around anyway.
Yeah. Back to some kind of technical future questions about updates on 4K support. We also have a question about multi-factor authentication.
Did I freeze or did I lose you? Because
I'm sorry.
can't.
Let me repeat myself then. We had a question from the forums about a couple of sort of technical hardware related, engineering related questions, 4K support and multi-factor authentication. Do we have any status
Yep.
updates on either of those?
Well, the multi-factor authentication is waiting on the launcher, so I would expect that later in next year. And the 4K support, I mean, obviously the client already has it. Sorry, the 4K support, this 4K support we're still working on. As I said before, we've been experimenting with the main map screen in order to get that to sort of open in its own panel and open and close smoothly. And you may not think of that as a direct 4K feature, but what that does is in updating the code that our panels use, this is step one of starting to do that panel by panel by panel for 4K.
Okay.
Did I lose you?
No, I'm looking through the forum thread to try to figure out what the next question is. I have a list of questions from the same person. I don't want to ask like 12 questions from the same person here. So
I think a lot of people are asking why do the parrot not have stats? There are certain things that when we're getting an expansion together, we kind of have to cut. So for the parrot, we all know it's not ideal that it takes a slot and doesn't have stats. It's more of a role-playing thing. And so when we're looking at all of the stuff, what do we want? Do we want to do another pass on endgame itemization for both questing and instances? Or do we want to kind of hyper-focus on the parrot? I think that eventually the parrot will probably get revisited when we're not all putting in an expansion. But when I look at my list of stuff that we want to address, having stats on the cosmetic parrot is it's not non-existent, but it's lower than some other things, and I need my people right now at least to be focusing on other stuff, and then we can look at the parrot and revisit sort of afterwards. It's one of the hard parts of being an EP is I would love to answer that, but right now the people are working super hard to get Umbar out. So kind of hyper focusing on the parrot is probably won't happen until until the instances are in good shape, which will follow Umbar.
I think there's also a question of like a piece of statted gear could be seen as, well, I need to wear this piece of gear, but I don't want a parrot on my shoulder. And so I think there might just kind of be some general, well, it's supposed to be a cosmetic.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about sort of the design behind it, one of the issues is if we put stats on the parrot, and the players will be like, but I love the parrot, but now the stats aren't good enough to really compete with this other item. And if we make it so that the parrot is best in slot, then people will be like, oh my God, I don't want to be tanking with a parrot on my shoulder, but now I have to.
Yeah.
So you almost, I don't think the solution is putting stats on the parrot. I think a solution would be having maybe a shoulder item cosmetic and doing like a new cosmetic slot, but that would require engineering and such is probably a better goal than just slapping some stats on the Parrot.
Yeah. All right, so this question is one from the list that Ish put on the forums. I figure this is as good as any because I also saw this question being asked a little bit in Twitch chat. So, how does SSG feel about alts? Ish writes on the forums, it increasingly seems it's more difficult to gear, maintain, and play an alt, mostly because of legendary items, but virtues and gear and locks are a pain point here too. What are we doing to make alts more friendly in Update 38?
This is a complex question with
It
a lot
is.
of landmarks.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me say this. My biggest fear is that you as a player don't have enough to do. It's not actually that you have too much to do and you really want to get that person to some arbitrary goal, but rather I'd love to play this character, but I don't have enough to do. So we have to be careful that we balance that. And one of the things that we do is there are people who just concentrate on one main character, and then there are people who do alts. So there are a number of reasons to play alts. If you just like playing an alt, we're in no rush to get you to the end game. You can develop as much as you want and explore the world from a different perspective, or maybe find things you didn't find before, or even take whole new paths before. So in that thing, we're not trying to get alts to the end game. I would rather work on there are many games that their solution to grouping is get to the end game and then group, right? They reduce the leveling path to try to get people to the end game so that they can have them in the most recent content. My goal for this is I would rather have tools to group than rush people through the game, because I think that they'll miss part of it. The other group of people is we need a tank, and now I have to get my tank to end game and gear up because we need alternate players to raid, and that is something that I think that players find, and that's why many of our mechanics are designed to sort of help you do that. For instance, when you level up, when you get to that end game, the traceries are all such that they replace your old traceries, so that somebody who's been falling behind, expansion is a fresh chance to catch up on the tracery stuff. That's an example of stuff we do. But then also, I've been reading the forums, and the players are like, "Oh my god, I hate when they do that because it feels like my old traceries kind of get replaced." But that's sort of design. That's like part of the catch up mechanic. So we right now are sort of in this mix, right? Like some catch-up mechanics are definitely there. Once you start re-gearing in a new area, you're building gear like everyone else and you're caught up. And then there's some evergreen systems like virtues that are meant to be something that you just work on for your entire career and work on.
Yeah.
And some of those, like for virtues, you really want to get your 4 slots. And the other stuff provides some benefit. You do eventually want to fill that out, but you don't need to. And that's sort of our alt for that. Concentrate on the slots you're going to use on the alts for virtue XP, and then you always have stuff to do. Now, one of the things in the past, and probably still current, is there are times when grinding that stuff, like playing the game and getting rewards, takes you to content that's too old for you, and that's something that we do want to fix.
Haderb wants to know, this one's from Twitch chat, when will we have access to the instances included in the Umbar expansion?
Probably early January. There's been some talk, and we're looking at trying to get them in December, but I'm not sure that I wanted to try to be doing the balancing and having people rushing to make groups with the holidays like right there. So if we are kicking ass December, but I in fact just assume that it's probably going to be early January rather than December. I'd love to get them out in December, but I'm a little worried about the timetable on it.
So we have a question from Twitch chat about the Essence slot changes that went into Bullroar here this week and got some community feedback. I mean, in some ways it's almost more of a systems question in terms of things like what's the purpose behind it, what's the motivation, and some of the technical aspects. But do you want to talk a little bit about the Essence system that went in and is coming in with Update 38?
I mean, behind the scenes, it's the whole problem we're trying to solve is pretty simple, right? Now that we have an increased role of the main stat, nobody wants a system where your only essence goal is to slot your main stat essence in every slot. So we increase the main stat so that its role in gear is more important, which I think was a good plan. And so now we're changing the essences so you just don't slot your main stat in everything. And that's basically what the goal here is. And I'm sure that with the forum feedback, people can sort of talk about, well, maybe that's not the way I'd like to see it done. Maybe that's not the way I'd like to see it done. But that's essentially what we're trying to prevent. If we didn't make any changes, everyone would just slot everything into every main stat all at once, maybe all of it. So that's kind of a boring system. So we're trying to mix it up by having, do we want some slots that can only take certain items? Do we want certain essences to be unique so you can only use one? So you have to get all the unique ones and put them into different places and then fill out from there. What's the best way of doing that makes it interesting? That's essentially the question that we're trying to answer right now. And that's sort of what you're seeing on the forums. And so if the players don't understand the question we're trying to answer, some of the changes that we're doing to essences might seem arbitrary. But then it goes into the second phase. Okay, well, if we use a unique essence strategy, then what ends up happening is you don't have much choice with that either. There's no interesting choices because you just get all the uniques, slot them, and then go main stat on everything. So then the second phase of that is, okay, well, how do we make it more interesting from there? Okay, maybe we have certain slots that take certain essences, so you still have choice, but you can't just do that. And so as we move towards that design, answering those questions or seeing are getting us deeper and deeper into these complex situations where we're trying to explain to the players, well, why are you making changes to the essence system? Well, it's because we made changes to the main stat system for normal gear, and now the essences need to remain something that requires choice and is at least somewhat interesting.
All right. Any chance we could get a currency cap increase on ancient script?
That is really specific.
Well, it's because
think,
you want it for all your LI stuff, and with the level cap
yeah,
increase coming,
yeah. I think that that's a reasonable request, but there's probably a systemy reason why we haven't done that yet. So I'd have to ask them. I think one of the issues about so ancient script, it's not like you're going to hold that back for later, right? Because you still need it to level your stuff. So there's probably a technical reason that we don't do that I can't answer right now because I haven't dug into the code for that specific stat.
I think it's also part of the wallet cap because we want you to spend that ancient script rather than hoard it. It's that push-pull that you see where the more desirable it is, sometimes the more you want a cap on it, but having a cap on it is also a pain point. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think one of the things that happens is one of the reasons we do caps is we don't want you to accumulate so much of the stuff that when we put out new content, you have no reason to play it. I'm not saying that that's the reason the ancient script thing is. I have not actually specifically examined that subsystem of Lotro, but we don't want a system where in old content, you're just accumulating something so high that when we put out new content, you don't have to do it. And you're like, why am I doing this new content? I have enough ancient script to last me for 2 decades. Instead, we were like, okay, right, for now, you're probably done grinding ancient script because you're maxed. And then when new content comes out, you'll find new places to grind ancient script. So you'll have a reason to engage with the game. That is the reason for having a cap for a lot of different currencies. I don't know specifically if that is the ancient script thing. But it could be too that everyone's working on Umbar and they just haven't had a chance to look at the specifics of the ancient script cap. So I apologize. I'm trying to go more into the design reasons of why we may do that rather than talk about that specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People have opinions. People have
Yeah.
opinions
Someone
about
asked
it.
about. So someone asked a really hard question, and I don't
Mhm.
want to duck it.
Okay.
So someone asked about Lotra Remastered. So the Lotra Remastered thing that EG7 was talking about was essentially it didn't make sense as a business for us to try to get this onto console. We looked at it, but as we really looked at the costs to do that, we have so much content into the game that redoing it for console is much, much bigger for us than a new game that might not have all of those systems and content in place. It was really getting to be an endeavor that was way out of bounds of our anticipated costs, which is why that was going. So in that case, we're all sad at that. And we're constantly looking for a way to pursue that in a different way or take a different angle on it. But for now, that's been backburned. As for the rest of the Lotra Remastered, we are continuing doing that internally, where there are a couple of aspects to it. One is an avatar revamp. You've seen that with humans. You really have a lot of different choices for humans in terms of changing face shape and all of that. We want to continue doing that with other races, elf, dwarf, hobbit, eventually. We also want to do 4K. So we do want to get these panels and have them start resizing for that. And what that will take is something that we're discussing now. And then we also want to do some and have some kick-ass graphics engineers now that are looking into sort of the subsystems of shadows and shaders to really make the game look better. And so those things are moving forward, maybe not as fast as we'd like because we're not like uh, we're not trying to release it all at once. Instead, we're trying to make incremental improvements to the game as we go along and reach those goals rather than holding them all back and releasing them all at once, which has a number of things. So I think that my goal is like at the end of 3 years, you'll look back and say, oh, wow, Lotro has really improved. But you won't have that. I open up my browser today, do an update, and it's like night and day. Instead, it'll be like sort of like, things will get better and better, and then the dawn will come, and you'll have that beautiful sunrise somewhere 2.5, 3 years down when the shadows look better, and we've worked on lighting, and the internal lighting looks better, and some of the way we do uh, culling of distance objects and having distant objects shade and scale differently. All of that stuff is being looked at currently. So there'll be incremental stuff that was going to go into remaster that you'll be seeing. So I know that that's kind of a complex thing, and I know it's disappointing to all of us to have to move away from going to console, at least for the time being. But until we get a better idea of what that will cost. The other thing that complicated it was we were hitting a moving target. By the time like this was sort of going and really looking at it uh, separately, there were new consoles coming, and so it was like, oh, okay, well now we're gonna have to step back and start the process again for the new console. And
Yeah.
do we want to support the old consoles? And that was a big deal.
Yeah, it gets complicated quickly.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and I know it's really hard to. Am I drifting
Just a little bit, but
into the
it's
thing? I
partially because I've
apologize.
got you cropped in on camera, so
Yeah.
it's
So
fine though.
that's one of the things. That's one of the things that is disappointing to all of us. But that's what you're seeing on the EG7 is people trying to explain to them that we had these goals, but the cost didn't make sense for the game at this point. And with new consoles coming, we had to be careful.
All right. Dole has a question. This one's from the forums. Are there plans to change the race system in the game in the near future, given that there are already 8 of them? Dole says, reworking passive skills, active skills, some kind of modernization, and so on. The big disappointment was the Mariner doesn't have access to the dagger as a legendary weapon. I believe the dagger is the offhand for Mariner, which is a disadvantage for the new River Hobbit race. I would like all these passive bonuses to get reviewed.
I think that that's a reasonable request, but not for Umbar. I think that would be something that's a good thing for the systems team to look at sort of in the future. But right, let's get out Umbar first. I think Dagger on Mariner might be something that you want to bring up, and there's
Yeah.
something we can examine after Umbar comes out. Yeah, I understand that a class fantasy for a sailor would be Dagger might be in there, but I could also see people saying, well, they're more like saber, axe, belaying pin, and dagger is more in the burglar range. So I could see you both on that. But I think that if there's a large outcry of making daggers available for Corsair, that's something that we can, after Umbar is finished, look at. And that is something that after Umbar is finished, we
I don't know the answer to this. Maybe you do. Nizamit wants to know: will we be able to get to barter yellow enhancement runes for purple or blue ones from the Barterer of Rivendell?
oh my God.
Yeah, I don't know the
Yeah.
answer to that. I'm sorry.
No, that's super. That's
Yeah.
probably something about a specific barterer would be something that I don't want to answer until I look at that specifically, and probably out of the scope of this. Also, I'm talking too much because I can hear people are politely saying, "Oh my God, like be more succinct in answering your questions." So I apologize.
All right. Well, I think Neteris just wants a yes on this one. Account-wide virtues or collections panel? Question mark. I don't know.
No,
No.
no.
Sorry.
Then we would have to. We don't want to get in a situation. We're already having lag issues with serialization. We don't want to get in a situation where your serialization has to include account data as well.
Another question from Ish from the forums. As an MMO seems like grouping should be a high priority. Are there updates being planned to existing technologies meant to build or make groups more seamless and enjoyable? We've heard about, say, a kinship update, but recently haven't heard much about it. What about the instance finder?
Yeah. So kinship update, thumbs up. We like that. We want to do that. Sometimes it's hard because it gets cut because a kinship update will be engineering intensive. And as you can see, as people are asking about 4K and people are asking about 64K servers and people are asking about a lot of engineering intensive stuff, this is the kind of stuff that maybe the kinship gets pushed out a little more because they all basically are calling on the same resources. So I hear you, but kinship will be big. For Instance Finder, if grouping isn't easier, the Instance Finder won't get better. Like if it's hard to get groups together because there's a wide range of people looking for a wide range of content, an improved Instance Finder won't help that. Either the groups are there or not. Now, I agree that the Instance Finder could use improvement, but I'm saying that I don't think that will solve the grouping problem. So a couple things. One is having events that naturally lead people to all wanting to do the same content at the same time will help grouping. Once 64-bit servers go and we actually can test how that reacts, we can maybe have bigger servers because we can have more servers attached to a 64-bit master server than we can currently. So that will help grouping because there'll be just more people on a server. And then the other thing that will happen is eventually we want to look at, is there a way that we can have people sort of inherit the um, the level of the group leader? So I could actually join someone's group and kind of get scaled to their level, and then we can do content together. The problem with that is that we don't have scaling rewards. So there's two pieces to solve. One is the technical scaling tech that would move players to the right level. That's hard. And it's hard to do well. It's hard to implement it all and hard to do well. And two is that what am I getting for grouping, right? Like there's our reward structure is very level specific too. So we would also have to have some kind of token you get while grouping that you can then spend once you're on group. Those are two very big problems to solve, but it's something that we've already started discussing whether it's possible for us to do it. Sometimes someone comes up with this like brilliant idea of, oh my God, if I just did this with the tech, we could get 90% of the way there on the grouping stuff and you're off. And other times they look and they're like, oh my God, this is going to take us months and months to even unravel. Um, you know, Locho is a big game that's been worked on by many engineers who had different styles of programming. So some of these things are very difficult.
Fallen Angel 1 says, will the UI rework affect 1080p monitors or just 4K? Because even on 1080, some elements might be too small. I think the answer is yes, right? If something like a UI scaling would really be resolution agnostic and just be a technological improvement, right?
Yes, that is
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Yeah, like once you can rescale, you should be able to rescale regardless of your screen size.
Okay, this one's from a Happy Kirby on the forums. Do we have any plan to do alternative, quicker leveling paths? For example, leveling to cap just through the epic storyline. It would be great as some players having alt accounts that want to reach the end game but still want to enjoy the main story. It would be no problem if this was tied to VIP too.
We do not, and that's more of the thing of we want. I would rather have you be able to group with other people and play games than rush you through the game. We just don't want to rush people through the game. I know that other MMOs have taken that strategy to try to get to people of the for the end game, but that is not a strategy that we're looking at to do right now. Is to rush people through the game. I would argue that one of our advantages is the game is there's so much gameplay. There's so much gameplay. It's really hard. I'm seeing a lot of these new games come out and people like burn through all the content in like 40 hours and then like they literally play for 2 weeks. Like they're super focused and then they're like, I don't know what to do. So I really think that some of these older games with so much content, it's a big advantage that you can, if you join Lotro today, there's so much gameplay ahead of you. That is awesome. That's really hard to find in any single game. So I don't know. I don't know that I would try to force people through the story.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, for the people, I think that one of the problems is that people have drifted from server to server. One of the things I don't want to start talking about server merges yet because I don't know how what the effect of the 64-bit server technology is going to be. The other concern I have with server merges is like we still know that serialization is causing lag, and we're still working on that. And until that gets in, I don't want to put a situation where the players actually have more lag on these mega servers because with more servers, it means as you move, you will serialize more, and that will cause you to have more instances of your lag, not less. We need to solve that before we do that.
Isfana wants to know, this one's from the forums. Can we expect a new legendary or alternate rule set server? Or rather, when can we expect a new legendary or alternate rule set server? What, if anything, has been decided about whether it'll be a progression server, let us choose how much XP we get, or something else about the rule set it will operate under?
I would love to see something early next year. I would have loved to see something this year, but the there is no uh, there are technical and engineering reasons why it won't happen this year, and so it'll be like something like that. We definitely want to do for early next.
Any chance we could give skirmishes a bit of love and attention? This from one from Nanda.
New skirmishes. We did do a new skirmish, um, as so we could look at that. I think that I like skirmishes because it lets many different people play the content. So we have two problems. One is when we put out new content, we want as many players to be able to engage with it as possible. But the problem with the essential issue with skirmishes is it doesn't solve the problem of having more people be able to group together. So I think the next stuff that we want to look at is like I want a reverse skirmish, right? I want a skirmish that anyone of any level can jump in and have a fun time, rather than a skirmish that will support anyone of any level. That's kind of the interesting thing. But I think that once Umbar is out, skirmishes are an area we can look to improve. Even just improving rewards for it or creating new ones would be cool.
All right.
There's some hard questions coming today.
Yeah, there
I'm
are.
kind
Yeah,
of liking
yeah.
it. I
It's been a while
apologize.
since we had you on, maybe, and just some
Yeah.
pent up interest because of Corsairs of Umbar.
Yeah.
Do you know the status of missions for Corsairs of Umbar?
Uh, I'd have to look. I think currently we're planning missions with the release of instances. Um, so people will probably be leveling in the beginning too much to really get value from missions. So if we have missions, they will come later. We'd love to have missions. Here's the thing. So we currently have missions planned, but if the instances get complex, missions the kind of the first things that we would cut for that. But I think we can get in missions. I know the current plan is to have some missions when the instance is released.
I'm trying to see what questions. We have about 12, 13 minutes or so left in the chat. Good time to get your question in if you would like to. Something that you're like, why haven't they talked about X? Maybe now's a good time to ask it. And otherwise, just anything that might be on your mind. This one's from Above Manway. Any plans to bring Lotra to DX12?
Yeah, eventually we'll have to go to DX12. The good news is that the problem isn't DX10 and 11. They have their own sort of. We have technology that can move from DX to DX. It'll be a lot of work, but we can do that. The problem is that technology, DX9 doesn't use that technology, and it's kind of rooted in some subsystems. So one of our goals and one of the things behind the scenes you don't see for engineering is to remove the dependency on DX9. We find that so many of our launcher and update errors are because the game forces you to install a DX9 into a new operating systems, and that's one of the reasons that we want to get rid of DX9.
Okay. Nenorus, I'm not sure. I didn't see your questions specifically in the forums. Like I said, there's a lot of wish list questions and a lot of questions that I also saw that might be more specific about this week's Bull Roar preview. That would be better questions for the systems team itself, especially when it comes to what was seen on preview this week. A question about Actually, that's not even a question. That's a discussion.
Okay, so let me go through some questions in Twitch chat.
Yeah, that sounds great while I look through some of this.
Right now, we're working on a VIP revamp for DDO, which will give you basically every month that you are going, you'll accumulate rewards. We want to do something like that for Lotro once it's in for DDO. So you'll be seeing some VIP updates that will make VIP cool. I can't, so that is something that is on our radar. I'm not making any promises about that, when it's coming or whether or not it's going to get cut. But right now the plan is once the DDO one is in, we'll have something similar for Lotra. So, let's see. There is no update on
I see Nenorus's question now. It's to the question, Nenorus, about bringing in more raiders onto the live stream here on Twitch. Have a regular raiding group stream on Twitch. That sounds great. If you're in such a group and you have an interest in being on Lotro stream, reach out to me. We'll have a conversation and see what your content looks like. Sure, we've had raiders on Lotro stream before, and we'd like to have them on again in the future. It's certainly something that we enjoy doing. I have found generally it can be a little challenging to have an ongoing raid live stream because some of the raiders that are involved in the live stream either don't want to share their tactics maybe, or just it gets competitive out there a little bit, and doing it every week for like a live stream show can be a little bit of a challenge to put yourself out there as a raid live streamer.
Yeah.
But if you think that's you, please do get in touch with me. I'd love to have you on.
The other issue with a raid is if you're live streaming a raid, it's a whole nother level of stress.
Yeah.
Because Lord knows I've had my times in raids where I've just made a boneheaded error, and if everyone everywhere in the entire world is pointing at you and being like, oh my God, how did you stand in the fire again? Because I'm just tired that day. That's so hard.
Yeah.
Right. It's it's a whole different level of streaming. So it's yeah.
But we
So
have had raiders on. Just most recently, Prime was on Lotra stream doing a bunch of raids. I haven't actually heard from them about whether they're going to do the Corsairs raid when it comes out, but I would expect maybe. So I would expect to see some of that. Now, your other question, though, was about incentivizing Twitch engagement on Lotro. Things like having Twitch drops and things like that. Have you thought about integrating the Twitch API or other APIs to the game?
I mean, yeah, but unfortunately, where that sits in our list of stuff to implement for engineering is pretty low. So I don't have, and it keeps getting bumped by new tech. So I don't have a thing. I think for now, here's the problem: is that Cordovan kicked so much ass that like he is good at seeding people on Twitch, and so some of it is because he's doing a good job with that. So we've been kind of relying on that a little too much, and we'd like to move on Twitch, but essentially there's a whole API that has to happen.
Yep.
Um, okay, there was some good questions earlier, but they've scaled off. Let me
Someone had a
look.
question about the image behind us. This is a painted image. This is not an in-game screenshot. This is a concept art style
It's
screenshot.
concept
So,
art, yeah.
yeah.
A lot of times for marketing, we will do a painted image rather than a screenshot so that the players, get a different. We've always done that. We've
Yeah.
always had painted images that are not necessarily uh, true representations of what you see in the game, mostly because uh, painted screenshots are something that the players will see anyway, and we want to sort of give them a new angle on it. But I agree in terms of like for stuff, I think we have to be sure that the art is representative of what the players will see. I think we've gotten kind of, there's an understanding that when the players see key art that's been painted rather than kind of screenshotted or painted over or whatnot, that it's not really representative of the game. And maybe in this case, we went a little too far with it in terms of like, sort of a piece for Corsairs and then what was true to the game. And that's I think finding that path is a good point. I'm glad people brought it up. It's something that I'll watch for in the future.
Yep. Any potential updates to the music system you've heard of?
I mean, we definitely want to do more new instruments eventually. So that would be good. Will it ever be possible to do emotes while seated? So in order to do that, I would have to take my limited animation resource and reprogram all of the emotes to specifically look for the seated thing and then create emotes for all of those while seated. And since that isn't part of the core loop, that's a big ask. That's a lot of work for something that maybe you'll do twice a year. Now, here's the problem is like seeded emotes would be something that a certain subsection of players that really like to have a different experience outside the core loop. Like for instance, that would be awesome for everyone seated at a in-game concert, which players like doing. So I get that, but the amount of work of animation work to basically you just have to take all those emotes and redo them and propagate them to every single race again. And seeded is even worse because you can't just shrink it. Like the seeded emote for a Hobbit has to be completely different from an elf. It's so you can't just map it. They're gonna have to. So there's also like that factor of seeded emotes are really expensive because now you have to customize them for the size and shape of each race. Rather than tweaking them, you basically have to do a new one for every single person. So you're probably not going to see it.
All right. Is it possible to get old raid housing items available for barter? These are basically old raid rewards that are housing items that this person would like to barter for rather than have to run the old raid to get.
that's something good to bring up at the forums. That's really specific. I think that a lot of players actually go back and do the raids over level to get these stuff. So putting them on a barter system, that's a good question because it does build into my core design philosophy of don't force players to do old content that isn't meaningful to them to get stuff. On the other hand, I don't know if that extends to cosmetics. So I am going to duck that question for now because the question is doing old stuff to try to get cosmetics different than doing old stuff to try to get your character in shape for new content? And I think those are two different questions. And I know that there are people who like to gather cosmetics as a collection, who like going back and do overpowered stuff in old content, and they actually kind of enjoy that as something to do while they're not doing other stuff. And I don't want to necessarily take that away from them. So it would have to be in addition to that. And so that is sort of the question there. So I think I'm going to duck that now because I think that requires me to think that through before making a flippant answer. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Tanlitz has been kind of hounding Twitch chat with a specific account-related question that you have. Customer support can address any kind of account-related or ban-related questions. We're really not in a position to be able to communicate about, your specific ban details or anything like that that might have taken place. So we can't really get into that here in our chat. Any plans to update carry-alls management, such as merging a few crafting carry-alls into one or creating a separate panel that displays all your carry-all inventory?
Oh my God, that would be such a pain in the butt. Probably not. Ugh, that would be a pain. Just the version load of the old carry-alls to support that would be painful. So I don't think that we'll be pursuing that. I don't have any plan to pursue that currently in the shorter term. So
Yep.
Umbar is not going to be released on November 1st.
Okay. Well, if we're going to say that, then let's just make that thing. So what can you tell us about the release schedule for Corsairs of Umbar?
Currently, if everything goes well, we're more looking at a November 8th timeframe. But keep in mind that if the quality isn't there, I'll push it. Right? Like sometimes we run into a bug with some new tech. We have a lot of new tech for professions that just hit Bull Roarer. We have a lot of tech for stuff. We still haven't done allegiances. We haven't even previewed the new city. So our current plan that we're on track for is November 8th. But if I don't feel, and if QA doesn't feel, more importantly, the quality is there, then it'll get pushed. So, but I think that is kind of where we are. That it won't be November 1st. I know we wouldn't be able to make it.
All right. So we'll have an update as to its formal release date as we get closer to it with, say, release notes and a downtime notice. But we're not looking at November 1st or maybe something like a week after. So just reiterating what you said. All right. Well, we're at 1 o'clock here. Is there any kind of final question or anything like that you'd like to answer before we call it?
Yeah, there's like 18 of them.
I know, so right?
We'll have to, yeah, like this. I appreciate that the players are asking some of the harder questions today. I'm sorry they don't have answers for everything, but I always appreciate your passion on that and talking about it. So Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me here on Court of the Rings. This show gets archived on YouTube afterwards. Next week, we'll have news, some stuff from Bull Roarer, probably, and beyond. So thanks for watching, everyone. We've got the Tolkien Professor up next, Druid's Fire after that, and Big Ed will be on later on tonight. You can find the full schedule over on twitch.tv/LotraStream. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
Yeah,
and I want to say goodbye. Wave goodbye there, Sev. And we're going to call it a show.
Everyone.
Have fun, everyone. Talk to you soon.